One of the most common and difficult to manage forms of gaslighting and coercive control in abusive relationships is reactive abuse. Now, this isn't a term I've ever really felt comfortable with, but it is the term that's used to describe a form of manipulation that occurs in coercive relationships. And it's whenever someone reacts with an emotional or defensive outburst to an abusive person's controlling, provocative, or harmful behaviour. Because the abuser then focuses on the reaction rather than what caused the reaction, and they use that to portray their victim as being unhinged or being the aggressor. It's a very insidious form of manipulation because it leaves people feeling unable to assert themselves, unable to question or even disagree in a way where they won't be accused of being cruel, aggressive, or sometimes even to blame for their own abuse. Now, the example I often use to illustrate it is person A and person B. Person A lifts a stick and they just start poking person B. Now, person B asks them to stop. They don't want to stop, they just keep on poking. Person B asks them to stop again, tells them that's really annoying. And person A tells them, well, I don't find it annoying, you're just too sensitive, and they keep on poking. Now, sooner or later, person B, maybe at their wits' end, they lose their temper and they grab the stick, they break it in two and they throw it away and they scream, just stop poking me with that bloody stick. But then what happens is person A claims that they're being abused. They claim that they're living in terror of person B's awful temper. And what commonly happens is person B apologises for their outburst. Now, person A, they lift another stick and they start poking again. But this time, maybe they're making eye contact and they're grinning because they have learned what they can get away with. And in many cases, not only does the abuse continue, sometimes it intensifies. Now, as with all forms of abuse, manipulation and coercive control, the impact of long-term exposure to this kind of gaslighting and blame shifting can have a detrimental effect on those who experience it. First of all, there can be chronic self-doubt. Many victims may know at their core that the blame, the accusations, have no real basis in reality and are in fact coercive, but they might start to fear their own outbursts, even when they're being provoked. They might fear other people believe in the abuser. And this self-doubt can impair their decision-making, as victims may fear making wrong choices, they fear triggering conflict and getting further accusations and further blame. And this can lead to emotional dysregulation, which results in mood swings, irritability, and a fear of having no control or agency in their own lives. And this can lead to them feeling trapped, not feeling able to do or say anything to assert themselves without the threats of consequences. So they begin to live in fear, because no matter how they may try to remain calm whenever they're addressing the abuse, they still fear being blamed for the conflict, as well as the threat from any potential consequences. Next, there can be a constant anticipation of provocation, along with a sense of helplessness to defend themselves. This can lead to hyperarousal, so they're always scanning for threats and triggers, which can over time lead to heightened anxiety, obsessive thoughts, sometimes even panic attacks. Now, some people might shut down when there's any kind of provocation or any kind of conflict. Others, well, they might develop a pattern of reacting impulsively to any kind of perceived threat, even in non-abusive situations, and this can reinforce their abuser's narrative. And victims can become so preoccupied with predicting or managing the abuser's behaviour that they just become mentally exhausted. Next, there can also be a lot of guilt. There can be intense guilt over their own behaviour, such as yelling and arguing, even when they're a result of deliberate abuse or provocation. And a highly skilled manipulator over a long period of time might convince their victim that they are actually the abusive one. Moving on, someone exposed to reactive abuse may develop people-pleasing behaviours to try to avoid conflict. They may become overly accommodating, overly apologetic, and this can lead to codependent behaviours and a difficulty asserting boundaries in other areas of their lives. As well as all the other things that people have to endure in narcissistic relationships, prolonged exposure to provocation and blame can erode someone's sense of self and leave them feeling like just a shell of who they once were. Next, there can be distorted thinking patterns such as catastrophizing or all or nothing thinking. There can also be brain fog. This is losing the ability to think or communicate clearly because there could be an ongoing fear of doing or saying the wrong thing. Again, a highly skilled manipulator might condition their victim to believe that they are responsible for managing their triggers. So what they're really saying is they are responsible for their abuser's behaviours, and there is something wrong with them for not being okay with it. So their sense of reality, their sense of right and wrong, becomes distorted. Now, over a long period of time, some may even come to blame themselves. They believe they deserve their treatment, now not necessarily because of their reactions, but because they feel unable to assert themselves in a way that stops the abuse. And this can lead people to feeling both helpless and hopeless. Lastly, narcissistic abuse can lead people to become isolated and feel disconnected from others, and for different reasons. But one of those reasons is the abuser's constant accusations of being the aggressor can also lead to threats of them telling others. And this can lead their victims to find it difficult asking for help in the first place. There can also be a fear of being judged, being ostracised, and above all, there's a fear of not being believed. Especially if that narcissistic person has a public reputation of being caring and kind or maybe helpless somehow. Or they've been spreading lies about how their victim is crazy, mad and unhinged. Now there are many other things I could mention regarding the long-term effects of experiencing reactive abuse, effects such as chronic stress-related symptoms and adrenaline fatigue. But I think it's important to recognise the first step to regain yourself is by recognise the patterns of behaviour. Also, to seek the help of a mental health professional. And as I often say, whenever someone's provoking you, if you react, they're in control. If you respond, even if you choose to respond, then you're in control. But if anyone would be interested in learning ways on how to handle reactive abuse, let me know in the comments section and I'll put something together for you. I'm Darren Magee, and if you find this topic to be helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel, and until next time, thanks for watching.